If you are looking at the news coming out of Switzerland right now, you need to sit down. You need to understand that the world you woke up in this morning no longer exists. The map of global power has been torn in half, and the United States of America is standing on the wrong side of the fault line. For nearly a century, American presidents have relied on one absolute, unbreakable assumption. They believed that no matter what happened in the world, no matter how severe the crises or how chaotic global events became, the United States remained the undisputed sun at the center of the geopolitical solar system. They assumed that the rules-based international order was permanent and that American influence was eternal. Donald Trump wagered his entire presidency on that assumption. He believed he could threaten the world with tariffs, dismantle global treaties, insult allies, and weaponize the American economy as a tool of coercion. He assumed that he could squeeze Canada, demanding total submission, and that Ottawa would comply because it had nowhere else to turn. For months, Trump acted under the delusion that America first meant everyone else must obey. He slapped punitive tariffs on Canadian goods. He threatened to tax Canadian energy. He weaponized financial infrastructure. He treated the largest, most integrated bilateral trade relationship in human history as if it were a cheap real estate negotiation. He backed Canada into a corner, asserting, "You need us to survive." But he forgot one crucial detail. The person sitting in the Prime Minister's office in Ottawa is not an ordinary politician. Mark Carney does not throw tantrums on social media. He does not govern through ego or spectacle. He governs through mathematics, through systems, and through deep, decades-long institutional relationships. He understands the plumbing of the global financial system better than anyone alive. He knows how money moves, how capital flows, and how alliances are built far beyond the headlines. When Carney took the stage at the World Economic Forum in Davos, the room was packed with billionaires, CEOs, and heads of state from across the globe. They expected polite diplomatic platitudes. They expected Canada to express mild discontent, perhaps hint at a need for compromise, but ultimately signal willingness to negotiate. What they got was something entirely different. Carney dropped a bomb. He looked out at the global elite and declared that the post-Cold War era of American hegemony had not simply transitioned, it had ruptured. He called out the hypocrisy of great powers like the United States, which used economic integration as a weapon, tariffs as leverage, and supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited. Then he used a metaphor that utterly shattered the narrative Donald Trump had built around the global economy. Carney referenced a famous essay by the Czech dissident Václav Havel about a humble greengrocer living under a heavy-handed authoritarian regime. Every morning, the grocer places a propaganda sign in his window. He does not believe in the message, and neither does anyone else. He does it to signal compliance and avoid trouble. Carney explained that, for decades, middle powers like Canada had been putting their figurative signs in the window. They had been playing along with the fiction that the United States was a reliable, rules-based partner. They had accepted subordination under the guise of mutual benefit. Then, with the entire world watching, Carney announced that Canada was taking the sign down. He declared the end of the fiction and the beginning of reality. Middle powers, he explained, have the capacity to stop pretending and to build strength by acting collectively. He said, with chilling clarity, "You cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination." Donald Trump demanded submission. Mark Carney delivered a revolution, and it was not just a speech. It was the launch of a highly coordinated, devastating economic strike. Let us examine the mountain of evidence that is emerging right now. Evidence of a capital reallocation so massive that it is designed to bypass the United States entirely. The first monumental receipt is the radical transformation of global defense spending. For decades, the United States defense industry dominated the world. If a country wanted advanced fighter jets, radar systems, or military hardware, it bought American. Carney has now flipped the board entirely. Canada unveiled a $180 billion defense industrial strategy, but the lethal part is that Canada joined the European Union's safe defense procurement arrangement. European aerospace firms and Canadian drone manufacturers can now bid on each other's military contracts with zero friction. This closed-loop supply chain entirely locks out traditional American defense giants such as Lockheed Martin and Boeing. The United States military-industrial complex has lost its monopoly overnight, all because Trump could not stop treating his closest allies like adversaries. The second receipt is the chokehold on the future of technology. The modern economy runs on critical minerals. Lithium, cobalt, and rare earth elements underpin electric vehicles, smartphones, and artificial intelligence. Under Carney's leadership, Canada is forming exclusive buyers clubs anchored in the G7. They are pooling resources to secure global supply lines for these materials, effectively creating a protective moat around their high-tech manufacturing sectors. American tech companies that want access to Canadian lithium or Australian cobalt will now find themselves at the back of the line, paying massive premiums while coalition members share resources tariff-free. Trump thought he could hold the world hostage with steel tariffs. Carney took control of the building blocks of the 21st century. The third receipt is the total collapse of American diplomatic leverage. While Washington has been paralyzed by infighting and trade wars, Canada has diversified ruthlessly. Carney revealed that Canada has signed 12 new trade and security deals across 4 continents. Strategic partnerships with China and Qatar have unlocked billions of dollars in new markets. Canada is actively building a bridge between the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the European Union, creating a colossal trading bloc encompassing 1.5 billion people. Every time Trump attempts to build walls, Carney constructs bridges, leaving the United States isolated in the shadows. He calls this strategy variable geometry, coalitions for different issues, designed around common values and interests. It is a dense, impenetrable web of alliances that completely neutralizes American economic threats. The contrast between these two men could not be starker. In Washington, you have a president who governs through chaos, fear, and insecurity. He reacts impulsively, assuming sheer American size will force everyone to comply. He treats diplomacy like a professional wrestling match, where volume and aggression are more important than strategy. In Ottawa, you have a prime minister who operates with the cold, lethal precision of a spreadsheet. Carney does not fight Trump on Trump's terms. He changes the entire global economic equation so that American threats become mathematically irrelevant. Carney is not motivated by anger. He acts from a pragmatic need to protect his nation from a volatile neighbor. But you must understand how this high-level geopolitical chess game will crash into your everyday life. As this new global alliance builds parallel supply chains, the era of cheap, frictionless global trade is dead. We are entering an era of severe economic fragmentation, and fragmentation is expensive. When American companies are suddenly locked out of these new networks, they scramble to find new suppliers for auto parts, electronics, and raw materials. Production costs skyrocket. Corporations do not absorb these costs. They pass every penny to consumers. Picture walking into a car dealership next month. The North American auto supply chain, once deeply integrated, is being torn apart. Parts that crossed the border multiple times before assembly now face disruption. Empty lots will appear. Prices will spike. A standard pickup truck could increase by thousands of dollars overnight simply because Trump decided to play tough with Canada. Think about grocery stores. Agricultural imports, packaging, and fuel costs will all rise. Inflation will surge. Tariffs effectively act as hidden tax increases on the American middle class. It is a burden placed squarely on your shoulders to subsidize a failed political strategy. Consider your retirement. If you have a 401k invested in the American stock market, the assumption of global growth and market access underpins your long-term returns. If 40 of the wealthiest nations create an alternative economic universe that excludes Wall Street, projections for American corporate growth will plummet. Tech giants, manufacturers, and logistics companies will all take a hit. Your life savings could erode because diplomacy has been treated as a reality show. Looking ahead, the fallout from this geopolitical upheaval is entering uncharted territory. and analysts are identifying three starkly different scenarios, each with potentially catastrophic consequences for the United States. Scenario A is what could be called economic surrender. In this scenario, the combined economic and diplomatic weight of the 40-nation coalition becomes impossible to resist. Global capital reallocates rapidly, American companies lose access to critical supply chains, and investor confidence collapses. The Dow Jones Industrial Average plummets by thousands of points in record time, sending shockwaves through retirement accounts, pension funds, and investment portfolios nationwide. Faced with the imminent threat of a full-blown recession, the CEOs of the nation's largest corporations converge on the Oval Office, demanding immediate action. They insist that if President Trump does not rescind the punitive tariffs and publicly restore normal trade relations, the country will face an economic depression. Reluctantly, Trump climbs down, issuing concessions and reversing his policies, but the damage to U.S. credibility is permanent. The world sees a superpower that can be pressured, manipulated, and ultimately forced into retreat. Once assumed American dominance now appears fragile and negotiable. Scenario B is a far more volatile path, one of authoritarian escalation. Here, Trump refuses to accept any defeat, perceiving a climb down as a personal humiliation that cannot be tolerated. He doubles down, declaring a sweeping national emergency, attempting to freeze Canadian assets within the United States, and militarizing the northern border to cut off trade entirely. This aggressive posture triggers an immediate economic catastrophe. Global markets react violently, credit freezes, and supply chains seize up. Allied nations, angered by the overt economic aggression, impose sanctions on the United States, isolating the nation from critical financial and trading systems. The result is an inflationary death spiral, a sharp contraction of the economy, and a sudden fall from the position of global leadership to economic pariah status. The United States, once the undisputed center of global commerce, is forced to navigate the ruins of its own making. Scenario C is the least predictable but potentially most destabilizing, a deep state mutiny. In this scenario, the American political and military establishment, alarmed by the sudden collapse of defense networks and the blinding of intelligence sharing channels, quietly takes action to restrain presidential authority. Congress moves to pass veto-proof legislation limiting the president's ability to impose emergency tariffs, while key figures in the military and bureaucracy implement measures to preserve operational continuity. Within the Republican Party, a violent fracture occurs between loyalists who support Trump's confrontational tactics and pragmatists who seek to stabilize the nation. Political paralysis grips the federal government, creating a constitutional crisis unprecedented in American history. While Washington stumbles, the rest of the world moves on, building alliances, trade networks, and economic institutions that function entirely without U.S. participation, leaving the country increasingly isolated and impotent on the global stage. In every scenario, one undeniable truth emerges: the American century is over. Whether through economic capitulation, reckless escalation, or internal political collapse, the United States faces consequences that will reshape not only its position in the world, but also the daily lives of every citizen. Regardless of which scenario unfolds, one truth is immutable: the old world order is dead. It did not end with apocalyptic war. It did not end with invasion. It ended because a polite, brilliant Canadian Prime Minister stood on a stage in Davos, looked at a chaotic American president, and calmly said, "No." Mark Carney has proven that the world can function without the United States. Stability, intelligence, and mutual respect are far more powerful than threats and tariffs. He removed the sign from the window and shattered the illusion of American invincibility forever. As you watch prices rise, factories halt, and global attention shift away from Washington, ask yourself this: is this the greatness you were promised? You are witnessing a fundamental turning point in human history. The map has been redrawn, and you are standing on the wrong side of the border. We will continue to track this situation in real time. We are monitoring currency markets, supply chains, and the frantic maneuvers from the White House. Mainstream media may avoid reporting the full truth, but we will provide unfiltered coverage. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay informed. The economic fallout from this Davos bombshell will affect your bank account faster than you can imagine. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Did Mark Carney save the global economy, or did he ignite the final trade war? Do you blame Canada for protecting itself, or Donald Trump for driving allies away? I read every comment. I want to know exactly where you stand. Stay awake, stay informed. The world as you knew it is gone.